Welcome back to the next part in our professional development on the STAAR redesign. I hope you found it helpful to actually see the new question types and how they will look to our students. As we mentioned before, House Bill 3906 called for a cap of multiple choice questions to be no more than 75% of the exam. And also, there's been the elimination of the standalone writing tests for grades 4 and 7. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about these two things in this part of our training. As you can see on this chart taken from the TEA's website, there are many different question types that have been incorporated as part of the STAAR EOC redesign. However, only certain questions apply to secondary ELA. We've put a check mark on the screen next to those that our students are likely to see. Pause the video and take a moment to review the question types that have a check mark next to them. And when you're ready, continue with the video. It is important to note that not all of the new question types will appear on every test every year. The new question types have differing maximum possible points per question, depending on the style of question. Points earned range between 1 or 2, 2, or greater than 2. As it stands right now, the short constructed response will be graded against a 2-point rubric. The extended constructed response will likely be graded against a 5-point rubric. But please know, as of the recording of this video, those decisions have not been finalized and the rubrics have not yet been released. So it is possible that those rubrics and the number of points for them may change. So let's review a few of these question types. One of the question types that students may see is called the text entry. It is very similar to a fill-in-the-blank question, where students will have to manually type an answer. These questions can be worth a maximum of 2 points, with the possibility of receiving 1 point for a partially correct response. You can see in this vocabulary question example how this could look. It reads, in paragraph 9, the word debut means, and then there's a blank. Students would be expected to type in an answer to what the word debut means. The multi-part question type is another question type our students are likely to see. Students will be responding to a 2-part question where parts A and B are scored separately. In many cases, part B will ask students to give text evidence or explain their thinking for their answer to part A. These questions can be worth a maximum of 2 points with the possibility of receiving 1 point for a partially correct response. Here's how this could look. In Part A, the student might be asked, which important idea is explained in both the article, The Cholla Cactus, and the poem, Cactus Wren? Students would select the answer choice that they believe best answers that question. Then in Part B, they are asked, which lines from the poem support the answer to Part A? And then students would make their text evidence answer choice. Now, to obtain full credit, the student would need to correctly answer both parts A and B. The student can obtain partial credit if they correctly answer Part A, but not Part B, but they will not receive any points if the answer to Part A is missing or if the answer to Part A is incorrect. A matching table grid is another type of question our students might see. In this example, you can see the question, which groups are most likely the intended audience of the article? For each item in the row, students decide, is this group the intended audience or not the intended audience? And they mark their selection. To get full credit, students would need to select all of the correct answers. In this example, which has 5 answer choices, if student selects 2 incorrectly, they still could receive 1 point credit. However, 3 incorrect answers would yield them 0 points. Multiselect questions will look a lot like the typical multiple choice questions. However, students will be expected to select more than 1 correct answer from a set of possible answers. Students will not be allowed to select more than the specified number of correct answers asked for within an individual question. These questions can be worth a maximum of 2 points with the possibility of receiving 1 point for a partially correct response. Here's an example. Which lines from the poem best support the conclusion that the speaker is familiar with monarch butterfly behavior? Select 2 correct answers. You can see that students are told how many correct answers they need to choose. It is going to be very important that we remind our students the importance of reading the instructions carefully. Short constructed responses will give the students a prompt and then a text box in which they have to type their answer. We are told that the short constructed responses will direct the students back to the text to a particular place in the text. You can see in this question that it starts out, in paragraph 3 of George Washington's portrait, why does the author include the detail of Gilbert Stuart talking to George Washington about horses? Support your answer with evidence from the article. It's driving students back to a particular place in the text, paragraph 3. Students will be required to answer the question and then support what they say with evidence from the article. As of right now, the short constructed responses are going to have a character limit of 475. Again, though, that has not been finalized, so it is possible that it might change. In addition, we are told as of right now that the rubric for the short constructed response will not include grammar and mechanics. The student's response will be scored based on the quality of their answer and provision of text evidence. With the short constructed responses, students will have the opportunity to earn partial credit. In this example, for full credit, the student would correctly explain why the author included the detail that it referred to and provided supporting evidence from the article. Partial credit could be obtained if the student correctly explained why the author included the detail of, in this case, Gilbert Scott talking to George Washington, but perhaps the text evidence was either missing or not relevant. They will receive 0 points if the response is incorrect, if it is not passage-based, or it is missing. The extended constructed response will require an in-depth, multi-paragraph written response. In other words, an essay. Students will be called upon, though, to explain, analyze, or evaluate information that has been provided to them in a reading selection. It will not be a standalone prompt like has been the case in the past. The extended constructed response as of right now will be graded on a 5-point rubric that will include grammar and conventions. Any of our secondary ELA grades may see extended constructed response on their STAAR and EOC. Here's an example of what this could look like. Students are first prompted to read the text in the passage, and then based on the information in the text, they are to write a response to a prompt. In this case, the prompt reads, explain how the characterizations of Ashok and Mrs. Lapidus contribute to the development of the plot in this excerpt. Write a well-organized informational essay that uses specific evidence from the excerpt to support your answer. Those of us who ever prepared students for the informational or argumentative essays in the old STAAR format are going to have to restructure our thinking when we see the word informational or argumentative in the prompt. These are not the informational or argumentative essays of old. If we look at what's being asked, this is clearly a literary analysis question. It is asking how the characterization of 2 of the characters contributed to the plot development. To respond thoroughly, students need to know the plot elements. They need to understand how the characters are presented and then make a connection between the 2. Specific evidence from the text and explanation of the student's thinking are required components of this essay. Here's another example. Look at what is being asked. Explain how Anthony's interactions with Grandpa help develop a theme about how sharing experiences may lead to greater understanding between people. In their brainstorming, students will have to locate the interactions between Anthony and Grandpa in the passage and then evaluate how those interactions develop the given theme. And then they will have to explain their thinking using evidence from the passage. So you can really see, even though it says write an informational essay, this is a far cry from the informational essays that we're used to teaching students to write in preparation for STAAR and EOC. The good news is that these types of questions are more like the things we do in class. A few other things that we know about the extended constructed responses as of right now is that there will be no more than one of these per test. The genre of writing will not be aligned to a specific grade level. The extended constructed responses will be in response to a passage that students are asked to read. And this might sound confusing, but the genre for the writing may not be the same as the genre of the reading. How this was explained to us in a TEA presentation was that, for example, students might be given 2 short informational passages, but they might be asked to write an argumentative response in which they evaluate one over the other. I think we'll know more about this as we see them in action, but for now, just understanding that the old informational and the old argumentative way of writing on STAAR and EOC needs to be put out of our heads because these are all response to reading, and all are going to require use of text evidence and explanation of reasoning and thinking in order to have a complete response. The last thing we want to touch on is how that writing content is going to be blueprinted onto the new STAAR and EOCs. Preliminary blueprints for each grade level have been released, and it'll be important for you to go and locate the blueprint for the grade level that you teach and just familiarize yourself with it. The blueprint gives a breakdown of which items will contribute to the student's score and those that are field tested. For example, for grade 6, you can see that the reading section of the base test includes 2 single reading passages and a paired passage, which will result in 26 to 28 multiple choice and non-multiple choice items. The writing portion of the grade 6 test will include 2 revising passages, 2 editing passages, and the 1 extended constructed response question for 17 to 19 multiple choice and non-multiple choice questions. And as of this preliminary blueprint, we can also expect that there will be 6 multiple choice and non-multiple choice field-tested questions. These preliminary blueprints can be found on the TEA website, but we have also downloaded and put them in our district curriculum documents drive for you, and you can find them in the district curriculum documents in the very first folder, which is ## curriculum documents, and 22-23 school year. As we receive more information, we will keep this folder updated with the latest information that we have. So how are you feeling? Hopefully this is not you and you are not feeling panicked right now. The really good news is we are ready for this and we have been preparing for it. In the 21-22 school year, all of our district midpoints were written with response to reading prompts. So students who have been in Grand Prairie have already seen these types of questions. In preparation for these changes, last year we also started making sure that teachers were trained in using the claim, evidence, reasoning model for responding to short and long answer questions. We encouraged you to use these as you were teaching students how to respond to reading, and this is the exact same strategy that we're going to suggest teaching them in order to be successful with the short and extended constructed responses. We have designed CER anchor charts that you can put up in your classroom and refer to often in your teaching. Our curriculum Canvas courses for each grade level have examples of the new question types built into different quizzes. Writable, which we introduced last year, also supports the new question types, and teachers can easily make their own responses to reading using the new question types. We will reflect the new question types in our district summatives this year. And again, in preparation for these changes, revising and editing were added to all grade level assessments last year. So students have had multiple exposure to revising and editing already in all grade levels. So there is no need to panic. We are ready for a great school year. Thank you so much for participating in this professional development. If you could, go back to the course and have a look at the table. The table lists some of the best instructional practices that are necessary in order for success moving forward, especially in light of these changes to student expectations in their state testing. Record on the table how you feel about each of these areas and where you might need additional help. When you're finished with that, please respond to the final open-ended question as part of this course. Again, thank you for participating, and if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to your secondary ELA team.